So awesome. This workshop is basically we're going to just be talking about how to animate SVG with GSAP. So if you don't know GSAP, GSAP is a JavaScript animation library. I work there as well, I would say developer relations, but it's a team of 3 people, so I'm kind of just like everything. But yeah, so I work at GSAP, like helping people like make the web a little bit more fun. And one of the my favorite things that you can do with GSAP is animate SVG. And I actually got really into animating SVG before I was working for GSAP. It was kind of my thing. And then they saw that and asked if I wanted to work for them, which was like pretty awesome. So this workshop is like, I've run this workshop quite a lot, but it's usually been spread out over a couple of days or a whole day in person or like a few evenings during a week. So this is going to be like a little kind of intro to animating SVG with GSAP. So I guess like before we get started, it would be cool to know what everyone's experience is like with SVG, with GSAP, with JavaScript in general. Like if you've done CSS animation before, if you've done any animation before, it would just be interesting to hear what your experiences are. If you're brave enough to like talk in the chat, feel free to talk in the chat. The more chatting, the better. But if you don't want to like speak, you can just type it in the chat. Clara, you can go first. I know that you've got experience. I'm just going to pick on you.
Yes, can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you. Yeah.
Yes, basically I did use it before. Um, I don't have a lot of experience with GSAP, but it's something I was looking for to get more experience. So this opportunity is basically great for it.
Okay, awesome. Cool. So we've got some people who've discovered SVGs recently and found them fun. They are super fun. Oh, awesome. You've got ones that you've made in Canva. That's cool. So animation from 3D world, like Blender and motion graphics. Used SVGs and JavaScript, but never animated. So that's like most of the way there. That's great. Oh, wow. Someone from the Flash days. Cool. SVGs are also scary. They can be a bit scary. Yeah. I think especially if you're just looking at SVGs that you get out of a graphics editor, because the problem with SVG is that it's basically it's like a scripting language like HTML. HTML is kind of made for documents. SVG is made for graphics. But SVG, it's kind of made to be interpreted both by humans and by like software, by programs like Illustrator and by browsers and stuff. So you can end up with SVG markup that is just really not human readable at all because it's being created in software like Illustrator and then spat out. And it kind of just looks like it's made for computers to read. Whereas like SVG that you handwrite yourself can be like a lot easier to kind of grasp. So awesome. Okay, let's kind of dig in. We've got a whole variety of experience. That is good. So does everyone have a CodePen account? Or have you used CodePen before? Is there anyone that hasn't used CodePen? Cool. So CodePen's really, really useful. It's like a little like online editor. Can everyone see my screen? Can you see the CodePen? Yeah. So it's like a little little online editor that you can use to kind of create little coding demos. Some useful stuff to note is you've got your HTML section here that you can put your HTML or your SVG in this case into, and then your CSS section, and then your JavaScript section. And we're going to be putting our GSAP code into the JavaScript section today. The layout as well, layout in CodePen can be a little bit annoying. So if you go up to this little button at the top, you can click change view. So I quite like to keep the code on the side. It usually gives you this by default, and I find that really annoying, like, because then you end up with a really tiny window that you're viewing everything in. And it's just a little bit hard to kind of code and look at what you're doing. So personally, I prefer to kind of keep my code on one side, and then you've got a nice square kind of preview block on the side. So yeah, that is CodePen. Guess we'll start from the beginning. I've already rambled a little bit about SVG, but like let's just start from the beginning. What is SVG? So SVG stands for Scalable Vector Graphic. So a lot of the clue is in the name. It's a graphic that is made with maths and has a whole bunch of points. And those points kind of are drawn out in infinite SVG space with maths, and they create a graphic. So rather than images like JPEGs or PNGs, which are just kind of pixel-based raster formats. The other cool thing about SVG is it's an image format and also a markup language. So if you've actually looked at SVG markup before, it's got like all of the different bits that make up the graphic are all different elements. And that means that you can kind of adjust stuff with code, which is fun. So yeah, can be manipulated with CSS and JavaScript. SVG can also be made accessible, so that's really cool. You can kind of, with SVG, if you're making graphs or infographics, you can put information for screen readers inside the code. So if you think about websites that you've maybe gone to where they've got infographics that are just PNGs, none of that information is accessible to screen readers. Whereas if you make graphics with SVG, screen readers can kind of get at information that you've got inside them. And they can also be super small if they are optimized well. If they're not optimized well, they can sometimes be massive. Shout out to designers base 64ing PNGs inside them. So yeah, I like to think of SVG as like an alternate universe version of HTML. So it's focused on graphics instead of documents. But ultimately, if you've kind of played around with HTML before and styled it with CSS and used JavaScript to kind of adjust things in your HTML, like it's pretty much the same thing that we're going to be doing with SVG. So there's a little tiny quiz just to get everyone's brains working. I suppose it's like different time zones for everyone. For me, it's after work and my brain is switching off. So if you've messed around with SVG before, try and tell me what the SVG universe version of these things is. So does anyone know what background color is in SVG world? You can type it into the chat if you want, or shout it out if you're brave. Nope. Okay, so we've got fill in SVG world. So with CSS, you've kind of got background color for elements. In SVG, elements have a fill. What about border color? Oh, there are messages. I'm seeing them now. Yes, stroke. Cool. Awesome. What about border width? This is a harder one. So stroke width. Border style. Stroke style. It's close. So border style is actually stroke dash array. Has anyone seen those like SVG animations where it looks like a line is being drawn out? In fact, there was back in my slides when I was talking about SVG. Da, 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 da. So that little line that's being drawn out, that's actually animating a big dash along a stroke in SVG. So that's actually animating the SVG stroke dash array property, which is quite interesting. That was, pretend you didn't see that. What about divs in SVG world? What have we got instead of divs? Yeah, so we've got group elements. So a group in SVG kind of groups things, does what it says on the tin. But a thing that you have with groups is also inheritance. So you could put a fill on an element in an SVG, or you could wrap a whole bunch of elements in a group and put the fill on the group, and then all of the elements inside it would inherit that. So it's kind of like a grouping element, but also for inheritance, which is quite nice. So yeah, why animate at all and why animate SVG? So my main reason for animating on the web is just because it's fun, to be honest. But also I used to do graphic design and motion graphics in After Effects. And when you're animating in After Effects, everything that you do just gets exported as like a static video. So like that's just the end of it. You animate some stuff, you export it as a video, you use the video somewhere. But when you animate on the web, you can hook into user interactions. So this little demo here, it's hooking into mouse movement. And you can hook into all sorts of things on the web. You can animate like according to scroll. You can hook into like how what's it called, the gyroscope on your phone. There's all sorts of like interesting browser APIs and other APIs out there and interactions and user interactions that you can kind of hook into and animate like according to those interactions, which is quite a lot of fun. It unlocks like a whole load of playfulness and creativity that you don't get with video. So has anyone ever tried creating like graphics with HTML and CSS? I know that there was like a big thing on Twitter a while back where people were making like CSS only artworks. Has anyone tried to do something like that? Traumatically tried. Yeah. Has anyone tried to make a triangle with a div and CSS? So yeah, if you try and make a triangle with CSS, you have to do this like really awkward hack where you actually like give the like all the borders like 0 height, and then you try and make a triangle just with like border styles, and it's horrible. It's very, very hacky. Whereas with SVG, all of that kind of stuff is built for you. Like there are elements that you can use to make various different shapes and stuff like that. So SVG is built for drawing in a way that HTML and CSS are not, which is Sarah Drasner's quote. Someone tried to make a bluebird with divs only. That sounds hard. So yeah, SVG is kind of built for making graphics. And whenever I see people making stuff with CSS and divs, I salute them because it's definitely like a fun, creative process, but it's hard. Like you're working against what HTML was made for. Yeah, and SVG is really great for creating like crisp, clean vector illustrations. This one on the Netlify, I think this is the old Netlify site, but I really like how it all just kind of staggers in. And this looks like it's using a 3D library, but it's actually just using SVG. And also for yeah, when you're learning how to code and you're kind of messing around with stuff, SVG is a really fun thing to play around with, because just like HTML, it's got a DOM. So this makes it really easy to debug. Has anyone played with Canvas before, or like Three.js? That kind of thing. So yeah, like if you're messing about with Canvas and you do something weird, the whole thing just kind of breaks. Like it's a little black mysterious box of JavaScript. Um, when I was like learning how to code, I was making this kind of little graphic that was going in the background of my website. And it was all working perfectly. And then I did some late night coding, which I shouldn't have done. And I woke up the next day and I opened it and everything was gone. It was just all black. And I had no idea what was wrong at all. And it took several days. And eventually I noticed that there was a tiny little white speck in the middle of my screen. And I went to brush the white speck off and it didn't brush away. And I was like, what is that white speck? And I looked closer and it was actually my entire canvas scene. I'd just accidentally added some numbers onto something and it was zoomed out like a million miles. So this scene was a million miles away and it was just this tiny white pixel on my screen. But it took days to figure out what was going on. Whereas with SVG, you can just right click and open DevTools and you can see in your browser in DevTools all of the different DOM elements and you can kind of click around and see what's going on. And also if your JavaScript fails for any reason, it will just fall back to an illustration because it's in your HTML to start off with. So it's kind of like nice progressive enhancement. Oh, Kimberly had to remake something from Flash in Canvas. That is tricky. Yeah, the lesson there is commit often, definitely. So you can also place the SVG DOM inside the HTML DOM. So you can kind of mix and match SVG and HTML. And that's really fun because you can create stuff like this, which was actually on the CSS Tricks website before CSS Tricks was no more. But yeah, like this is an actual semantic form. Like the form is accessible, the button is accessible. It's just kind of got this fun little animation layered on top of it. These kind of things, I love stuff like this, like SVG animations used alongside like booking flows or like boring kind of quiz things, questionnaires, like forms, that kind of stuff. It just kind of makes things a little bit more fun. Um, this one's a real classic. I think I've seen about 1 million copies of this since Darren Senef made this. Um, yeah, good fun. You can use SVG for logos and text animations as well, because SVG is a scalable graphic. You can use it for like really big graphics, or you can use it for like little logos and little icons, and it'll still be nice and sharp. So I made my little logo on my website with SVG. And the nice thing about that is screen readers read it out as normal text. Little micro interactions. So icons are super fun for SVG animation. And I get a lot of people in my workshops are like, oh, I don't know how to draw. I don't know where to start with SVG animation because I'm not an artist and I can't make, illustrations. Icons are so much fun for animating because you've got to kind of really think about what you're doing with a really small amount of space. And also icons are serving a purpose, like they're getting a point across. So it's kind of a challenge to take an icon and convey that point and convey the purpose in a short amount of time with a small amount of elements. Cool. So including an SVG. You can include an SVG just like a normal image. So a lot of people will have done this with SVG before, just either in like an image tag or as a background image. They'll still be super sharp on like all displays and responsive and all of that kind of stuff, but they behave just like normal images. So we won't be able to access the SVG DOM at all. So this is how we're going to be doing SVG in this workshop. This is inline SVG. So you can just copy paste the whole SVG, all the internals, the gubbins of it, and then pop it into your web page, and then you can access all of the stuff that's inside it. So we're going to take a little look at this SVG together. And I'll open it up for like questions as well. Like feel free to throw as many questions at me as you like during the workshop. So Kim shared a Google Doc with everyone. We'll pop that into share that again. Oh, that's not it. Ignore that. Yeah, there's the Google. Thank you, Kimberly. So yeah, there's the Google Doc, and we've got a starter pen in there, and there's also a link to the slides if you wanted to have a little look at the slides. You can also put any questions or comments or notes or anything inside this Google Doc. It's like a shared little information hub. So rather than everyone writing their own individual notes, it's sometimes nice to write notes together, because then you kind of get the benefit of everyone else's notes as well. So yeah, if you go to the starter pen and then open up the HTML panel, I've kind of thrown everyone in the deep end, because we could do some nice like hand-authored SVG with like 3 different elements. But that's not usually what you're going to be getting in the real world. What you're going to be getting is exports out of Illustrator or out of Canva or whatever other vector graphic program you're using. So the one thing that I have done with this is I've cleaned it up really nicely. So I've run this through SVG ONG, which is a really good SVG optimizer. And I've gone through and I've given everything nice class names. Everything is like labeled nicely, and there's no horrible transforms in there. So it's nice, tidy SVG, but it's also still a lot of SVG. So it's a good thing to do now would be to just like poke through it a little bit. I'll give you a few minutes just to kind of look through the SVG. We've got this little UFO spaceship thing, and then there's a little beam with a human being abducted at the bottom. And if you look in the SVG, we've got a title. And that will be read out by screen readers, which is nice. And then in amongst all of this, we've got a group for the UFO with an ID of UFO. So pay attention to what the IDs and classes are, because these are things that you're going to be using to target and to make animations. So we've got a UFO, we've got a beam here, and then we've got a person. So that's that little guy. If you're unsure, you can just kind of like comment bits out, and then it will refresh and you can kind of see that stuff disappears in the viewport. So I did that by highlighting and then pressing Command ? But I'm on Mac, so I don't know what it would be on other things, but maybe that's helpful. Cool, and you can see that things have got fills like inline on the SVG as well. So you can style SVGs with CSS just kind of normally, but you kind of run into like specificity issues if you do that. So I kind of quite like to have presentation attributes with my SVG, and that's like this. If I zoom in, this is a presentation attribute. So you could do that with CSS too. But this is kind of keeps everything in your SVG and nice and tidy. So if you wanted to change any colors, you could go in and change the colors in the fills and the strokes and stuff like that. Otherwise, just have a little poke around. I'll put a link to SVG OMG as well. Do-do-do. Cool. So we're going to be using GSAP to do animation. I was also really annoyed when I woke up this morning because I remembered that we've just recently done a big rebrand. So all of my slides were like old stuff. So I had to run through my slides really quickly and change everything. But it's worth it because we get to put this stuff in there, which is fun. So cool. We're going to be using GSAP to animate. There are a few people that said that they've used GSAP before. If you haven't, don't worry about it at all. I actually learned how to use GSAP before I learned how to use JavaScript. Like I when I was learning how to code, I was like just hiding in I was coming in from a design point of view, so I was hiding in HTML, CSS land for ages. And just kind of wanted to do animations and interactions and UI and stuff. And I was terrified of JavaScript. And then I discovered GSAP, and that was kind of my entry into things. So it's like a nice, comfortable API, whether you've got experience or not. I think I might have missed out. No, I missed out a little section. That's fine. So GSAP, we can go to the website actually. There's like loads and loads of docs, and there's a little learning center as well. So I've recently put together like a getting started section in the learning center. So after this workshop, if you kind of wanted to dig in a little bit more, that's like a nice place to get started. I'll pop that into the docs too. But basically, there are loads of things that you can do with GSAP. So if you go to the docs and take a little look, this kind of gives you a good overview of the whole GSAP ecosystem. And we basically have the core GSAP library, and that library does everything that you need to do. Like most people will only really use the core library. It like has stuff to help you do responsive animations and all sorts of like helper functions and utilities and stuff. But then there are also plugins that you can add in to kind of add on additional functionality. So you can add in plugins like scroll trigger if you wanted to do scroll driven animation, or draggable if you wanted to drag things around. And there's a whole bunch of SVG specific plugins as well. And some of them are publicly available for everyone, and then other ones are for club members. So they're like paid plugins, but you can trial any of them on CodePen for free. So yeah, that kind of gives like an overview of everything. The most important things to know are tweens and timelines, though. So tweens are how you animate something, and then timelines are how you create sequences of animations. So we're going to start with tweens. So what is a tween? A tween is basically like the heart of the GSAP engine. You can think of it as like a really high performance property setter. So it changes a property that you tell it to change really performantly over a period of time. And that's basically all animation is. It's just kind of changing a property over time. So GSAP has three methods for creating a tween. You've got GSAP from, which animates from a certain point to wherever you're at. You've got GSAP 2, which animates to somewhere, and then you've got GSAP from to, which, surprise, surprise, animates from somewhere to somewhere else. So here we've got a GSAP tween. So we've got the method, GSAP from, that's the method. And then we pass in a target. So we're passing in UFO here. This is what we want to animate. So we're basically saying, hey, GSAP, get this thing, and then I'm going to tell you to do something to it. And the target, you can use any CSS query. It uses query selector under the hood. So you can use like an ID or a class, or you could use a more complex CSS selector if you wanted to. You can also pass in arrays of different objects, or you could pass in a variable if you wanted to grab something in JavaScript as well. And then lastly, we've got the vars object. So GSAP uses CSS transforms, matrix transforms underneath the hood, but we've got shorthand. Instead of you having to write out transform translate y minus 100 pixels, you can just write out the shorthand. So we've got x is horizontal, and then y is vertical. So this is the same as saying translate x minus 450 pixels. Another thing, because we're in SVG land, so we don't have pixels in SVG land, we've got SVG units. So I'll talk about that in a little bit as well when we start moving things around. So this is a from tween. From is really good for entries. So it's like saying, hey, GSAP, I want this thing to come from this place and animate into its current position. So that's animating the UFO from 450 SVG units to the left. You can use to animate to somewhere. So that's animating from its current position in the center, and it's taking it to minus 450. And then from to, as I said, you animate from somewhere to somewhere else. Cool. So we're going to do a little bit of coding now. Hooray! Less of me talking and more typing stuff. So if everyone opens up their little starter template. I've put a few little tweens in there for you to start you off. So we uncomment that, you can see that it's animating in from the left-hand side. So this number, it kind of seems like a little bit of a magic number. But if we take a look in the view box, so this is the SVG view box, and a view box is basically like, it's defining the piece of the SVG graph paper that we're looking at. You can think of SVG as like an infinite bit of graph paper that there are things plotted onto. So this is saying, start the SVG graph paper at 0, 0. And then we want 400 SVG units wide and 250 SVG units high. So basically, this is saying that you've got the width of your SVG is 400 SVG units and the height is 250 SVG units. So now that you know that, you kind of have more of an awareness of how many units you need to move things by if you're animating. So yeah, if you know that, then you can kind of work out how much you want to move things by. You can also just play around and kind of add in numbers and see what happens. Does anyone have any questions? No questions? Cool. We'll do a little rotation as well, because rotations can be a little bit tricky. So if we rotate around the UFO, you'll see, okay, wait, I'll make that a little bit slower. So you can see that it's spinning. Do you need a link to the code pen? That's all good. I'll put it in the, oh, the starter pen is in the doc. So that's the starter pen. And then this is the doc with all of the information in. Cool. So if we rotate this, I'll make this infinite rotation. So we'll put repeat -1, which is basically like saying infinitely repeat the animation. But you can see that it's spinning from its top left-hand corner. And that's a difference between HTML and SVG land. With HTML elements, the center of rotation, the center of transform origin is the very center of the element. Whereas in SVG, it's the top left-hand corner. And that's kind of because of the coordinate system in SVG always starts off with like a top left and top left corner. So it's like 0, 0, width and height. So if we want to change that, we change that by saying transform origin. So transform origin, and then we can say center, 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 like that, and that will rotate from the center of the element. If you wanted to kind of fine tune that, you can pass in percentages. So that will say the center and then 30% down from the top. Or you could say center top, and that will rotate from the middle top of the element. So yeah, transform origin is really good for kind of, spinning stuff around an origin point. Awesome. So I'll let you do a little bit of coding now. So I'll give you maybe like 15 minutes to add an animation, add a tween, add a couple of tweens if you want, play around, move around some bits of your SVG. If you're not sure about what bits you can animate, I've added in a document here. So these are the docs for my full SVG animation workshop, which you're welcome to. You can keep them and you can poke around in the information if you want. But for now, I've just kind of linked to a properties table. So this has got some of the common things that you might want to animate. So we've got duration, that's how long your animation will last for. Repeat -1 is like an infinite animation. But you can also give GSAP a specific number of repeats. So you could say repeat twice or repeat 4 times or 5 times. If you want to repeat the animation but kind of bounce back from the beginning and the end point, you want to put yo-yo true. That's kind of like animation direction alternate. And then there's a whole bunch more things there, just X and Y. You can also animate X% and Y% instead of X and Y. So that's going to give you the percentage of the element itself rather than a specific SVG unit value. And then rotate, fill and stroke as well, and opacity. Those are good ones to animate. So kind of poke around and have a play around with those. At the end of the day, there's not a whole finite list of things that you can animate though, because GSAP is just a property setter. So if SVG has a property that's animatable, you can animate it with GSAP. And what I mean by is animatable, I mean a property that isn't a Boolean, because there are some properties like background image, for instance. You either have a background image or you don't have a background image. You can't animate between 2 different background images because there's no middle state at all. There's no property that is half this background image and half that background image. So as long as there's a property that has numbers that can be interpolated between, you can animate it. So yeah, if in doubt, just give it a go. And if it's not working, then shout and I will help you. On that note, if you're tweaking things and it's not working, oh, I should mention this as well. If you click fork at the bottom of that demo, it'll open you up your own one, which you can then save. So make sure that you fork it and save it so that it's your own demo. And then if you get stuck at all, just post that link to the code pen into the document, and then I'll give it a little debug. Oh, I don't know what DXF files are. What are DXF files? I have to do a Google. Oh, CAD stuff. No, I've got no idea about that, I'm afraid. I've never done any CAD things. I'm sure there's got to be some npm package somewhere that does that though. There usually is. I can't attest to any of them. Try Googling DXF to SVG. Yeah, it looks like there are converters. So, I mean, maybe give them a go, see what happens. Yeah, I think you basically got someone saying, let me Google that for you.
No, I'm just asking because all those free applications to convert between files, sometimes it's just a honey trap. And just double checking just in case. I found like 3, but
yeah.
well, it's good. Good. I'm liking this.
Cool. Yeah, and if you're brave and you get stuck at all, I suggest like just going to the GSAP docs. Like they're very friendly. I say this, I'm very biased because this is my baby. Like, they are my docs, and I built out the new documentation website. So like I'm like, everyone go to the docs. They're friendly and full of demos, but they are. There's like all sorts of little things in there. Loads of code pen demos that you can fork, and stuff. So yeah, give it a go. Give it a go. Oh, I'll show you a fun thing while we're doing this. You can carry on working. I'm just gonna tinker. So I think we've got some lights in here. Some lights. There we go. So we've got a group which has got some lights in. And the lights, where are they? There we go. Yeah, the lights group has a load of paths inside, and those paths are these little lights that go around the top of the spaceship. A fun thing that you have with GSAP is staggering. So we'll get rid of all of this quickly. Let's say lights. So I think it is an ID. Yeah, I think everything's an ID. So that's going to target all of the paths inside the lights group. We can say fill. Let's make fill white. Cool. So that's animated them all to white. We'll give it a duration of 1. So this should, don't know if you can see that. Let's also do a little scale. Okay, we'll do a little scale, and we'll also make it scale from the center, not from the side. So, okay, cool. You can see the lights are doing something now, at least. A cool thing that you can do with GSAP is just really, really easily, you can say stagger, and that's gonna do them all one by one, rather than all at the same time. And you can also pass in an object for staggers. So you can pass in a stagger object. We're going to say each 0.2. And if you put the repeats inside the stagger object, you get slightly different behavior. So if the repeats and the yo-yos are outside of the stagger object, it'll go through the whole array and then stop and then go back again through the whole array, and then go through the whole array again and then stop and then go back again. Whereas if you put the repeats and the yo-yos inside the stagger object, each one will play and then repeat immediately. So it won't wait for the entire array to be finished. It will kind of play, repeat, and then the next one will play, repeat, play, repeat. So yeah, you can do kind of fun stuff like that with staggers if you wanted to have a little play around with the lights. I'll put this in the docs as well. Run this using VS Code. Yeah, I mean, you could. For this workshop, I've just gone with CodePen so that people don't have to worry about their own personal setups. But yeah, you can. If you're asking about how to do it with CodePen, I think you might be able to click the export, like export as a zip. But yeah, I can't, like, hopefully that's enough information for you. How's everyone getting on? Has everyone managed to animate something? Is anyone super stuck? All thinking. Okay, I'm gonna go check on my dog for 5 minutes. Someone already discovered easing. That's good. We're gonna do that next. I'll leave you for 5 minutes. I'm gonna go check on my dog and then I'll be back.
How's everyone getting on with their SVG? Is anyone brave enough to unmute themselves and talk?
I'll be honest, I'm a bit behind because I kind of joined late and I've been chasing myself a bit to catch up. So I've got very little,
okay.
if nothing.
That's okay. These are designed so that you can watch along. Or
This is Brody.
Oh.
He says,
yeah, I found it all really fascinating, Kimberly. I don't mean to suggest anything other than I will get stuck right into it. I just, you know, where like I'm kind of chasing myself a bit, but it is all really fascinating. And I let out an actual audible when I saw the little lights change. It's simple things, man, but it was so cool. It's just like, oh, sweet, the lights went.
Nice.
Like designing games with things like Unity and stuff, where it's just like everything's a nightmare to find the first time. It just seems really easy. Obviously, building the UFO itself is probably a bit of a mission, but I really like how modular it all seems. Like just like coding, you know, you go in and you tweak variable A, and the whole thing ships. Really cool.
So, do you normally build games in Unity?
Well, I have had a go. My main experience is more like software dev stuff.
Okay, yeah.
So I was just thinking, in terms of like comparability, there was like a guy I was on the thing with made a UFO, and it was ridiculously complicated and cool, but I just didn't know how to approach it. With this stuff, it seems really like, even the complicated stuff seems like it's, you know, little tiny modules that click into each other, you know. So it seems really, it seems like you know, old saying about a mountain, each footstep thing. Like I feel like this is like I can see the footsteps you have to take to get up this
Yeah.
mountain,
Oh,
whereas
nice.
sometimes you just see the mountain. You know what I mean? But yeah, no, it's really inspiring. Thank you very much, Cassie, and everybody.
Oh, that's good. I'm glad. Yeah, it's nice. The mountain thing is the cool thing about GSAP is it's not just like an SVG animation library. Like you can use GSAP to animate anything. So I've even seen people with like Unity projects that they've exported stuff out and then they've used GSAP to animate bits of it. Because basically like anything that JavaScript can touch, like GSAP can animate. So you can use it for like 3JS or for UI animation or SVG or whatever, really. So it's kind of like it's got small baby steps to start off with, but lots of possibilities at the end.
So just
Nice.
sorry to jump back in there, but like in terms of like animating anything, like you're saying, if I'm building like, I don't know, just like classic React template websites and stuff, could I basically be thinking of GSAP as a way to like manipulate literally everything on that page? Or is that a bit nuts?
No. So yeah, like for React, we've actually just brought out a React hook called use GSAP. So you can use GSAP in React. It like really nicely cleans up all of your animations for you because React makes things a little bit difficult. So yeah, you can just use GSAP to animate anything in React land.
Yeah, that is really cool. I didn't realize that you guys had just done that. Obviously, good promo point to be like, oh yeah, I made one of those. But I was just genuinely, when you said anything JavaScript, in my mind just went massive. Like I could like animate pretty much any behavior that's a use effect or any call or just pretty much anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's really cool. Thank you.
Cool.
How is Brody?
Oh, he's good. He's also muddy. I was like, come here and say hi. And then he jumped on me and I was like, muddy dog.
Yeah.
Muddy
Oh.
dog. He's really happy at the moment because we've got a friend staying with us and the friend happens to own his girlfriend dog, like his bestest friend in the whole world. So they're just running around together being chaotic.
Oh, our friend's dog stayed with us. Well, he left last Sunday, but he was with us for a week. And it was at one point during that week, I said to Adam, should we get another dog? And then I was like, no, wait. The only reason we're really enjoying this is because Rio is so calm compared to like our dog, Pixel. Otherwise, it would be chaos. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I was like, oh, she seems so happy that she's got a doggy friend with her all day.
Oh, yeah, that's a really good question. So, can you use it in other JavaScript frameworks? The answer is like yes. The reason that we have a hook for React is because React really does not like people touching the DOM. Like React is state driven and React makes the simplest things really, really complicated. Other JavaScript frameworks don't make things as complicated. So GSAP's just a JavaScript animation library. You can use it anywhere, like in any framework. People use it in Vue and Svelte a lot. Like it's just JavaScript at the end of the day. The thing is with React is you've kind of got to deal with like effects and like a whole bunch of kind of other little periphery things. So we've made the hook to make things easier in React. But it doesn't mean that GSAP is for React, like GSAP is for anyone. It's just easier in other frameworks. So yeah. Has anyone discovered using? Oh, carry on.
So Casey, yes, basically, it's because I'm thinking to create like kind of an operational thing for my business. I was thinking to use React, but every time I try to do components in that I have in HTML, trying to add it to React, it gives me a lot of problems.
React does give people a lot of problems. Yes, I can agree
Yes.
with that.
So, which will be the best framework for using GSAP in terms of not giving a lot of problems? I don't know really if there are any.
So yeah, it's not really determined by GSAP really. Like the best frameworks to use with GSAP will be the ones that don't give you problems in general, the ones that let you write your own JavaScript. So like, for instance, GSAP is really nice with static site generators, because static site generators make it really nice and easy for you to write your own JavaScript. So stuff like 11t, that's really nice. Most other JavaScript frameworks, to be honest, they have like more event-driven callbacks. So for instance, with like Vue, you've got on mounted and on unmounted. So you can just go, when this thing mounts, do some animation. When it unmounts, clean up the animation. Done, sorted. Whereas with React, effects and your component aren't always like operating at the same time. Like, effects can be torn down while the component is still up, and there's like a little bit of a mismatch there. So yeah, basically, like, anywhere you can use JavaScript, you can use GSAP. It's just up to you what flavor of JavaScript you're writing, really.
Okay, thank you.
So yeah, easing. Let's add some easing into our tweens. So if you've gone to the GSAP docs, you might have found the easing page. Let's find the easing page. There we go. So here is easing. There's a little ease visualizer in the GSAP docs as well, which is really nice. So you can kind of like click around and play around with a bunch of different eases, and then it shows you the syntax in a little code snippet underneath the bottom. So you might recognize this if you've done CSS animation before. This kind of ease is quite possible with CSS. So with CSS, you've got cubic Bezier. So you've got two handles and you've got a little squiggly line that goes between them that makes the easing curve. The cool thing about GSAP is that you're not just limited to a cubic Bezier for easing. So eases in GSAP are SVG paths, which means that you can do stuff like rough easing. So here we've got rough easing. You can have a cubic rough ease. We could give it 100 points and we could taper it out towards the end. And stuff like that is like, eases like this are really, really, really useful if you're doing complex animation, because if you think about, if you were trying to create that kind of movement with CSS, you'd have to create it with lots of keyframes, right? You'd have to like go here and then go here and then go here and then go here and go here. Whereas you can create eases that do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. So yeah, there's like loads and loads of different eases here. So give this a go, click around in them. And then, yeah, you can just copy and paste the ease into your tween and kind of play around with how different eases make your animation feel. A really useful one as well is custom ease. So you can create your own, there we go. You can create your own easing curves using custom ease. So this is like, this gives you a good, this is a good demo actually of how you can use eases to do the animation work for you. So usually with most eases, you've got it animating from the start value to the end value over a period of time. Right, so if we look at this here, we've got the progress along the bottom, and then we've got the value going up the left-hand side. So this ball's animating from the bottom to the top over that easing curve over that time. If we look at custom ease, right, because we're not restrained to a cubic Bezier curve, we can actually do weird things like this, where we can say, actually, I want you to end at the beginning progress, beginning value. So this is now saying at the beginning of the animation, we want to be at the start value. In the middle of the animation, we want to be at the end value. And then at the end of the animation, we want to be back at the value from the beginning again. So if you look at this, the ball goes up in the air and then falls back down again. So that animation was just made using an easing curve. Like we didn't pass in two different values at all. We just passed in an easing curve and it animated to the end value and then back to the beginning value again. So you can do all sorts of really like nifty little things with easing curves. That's a good question, Rose. So Rose just asked, how does this work if a user has set prefers reduced motion on their browser? So you have to handle that manually. Like that's up to a developer to respect that. We do have, we've got something called GSAP Match Media. I did a little video on it here. But with Match Media, you can check for a media query. I'll zoom in a little bit. Check for a media query and then animate if that query matches. And then that updates dynamically as well. So if the user changes like the width of their screen, you can set up animations to happen on mobile or on desktop. But with Match Media, you can also set it up for reduced motion. So I think that there's, there might be a demo here somewhere. Yeah, here we go. So this little code snippet's got a reduced motion thing in there. I think that there's also a demo in here somewhere. Reduced motion. I'll add it into the docs. Yeah, this is a little bit of a complicated reduced motion demo because it's also got a toggle. So this is handling reduced motion user state on the machine and also like an opt-in state that's in the website itself, like a user operated toggle. So yeah, but you can say reduced motion, or you can not reduce motion and then it will animate more. So yeah, it's something that you have to do yourself, but it's very possible to do. Has everyone managed to add an ease into their animation? I'm assuming so. Oh yeah, so these slides, I'll link to my slides afterwards. Some of the eases with GSAP are built into the core. So if we go to the docs, you can see all of these eases. These are all part of the core GSAP library. So there's like elastic ease and back eases, expo eases, bounce eases, all of that sort of stuff. When something isn't like essential or used a lot, we kind of pull that out into a plugin or into a separate file so that we can kind of keep the core nice and small. So if you want rough easing, expo scale easing or slow easing, those are in a separate ease pack file, and then custom ease is also separate. But the code pen that I provided you with the little UFO, that's got everything loaded in there for you, so you don't need to worry about that. But yeah, just so you know, that's where they are. And then there's some paid eases as well. Custom bounce is a really good one. So bounce, it allows you to mess with the squash and stretch. So you can kind of create realistic bouncing animations that kind of feel like they've got some mass and momentum to them, which is quite important when you're animating stuff. It's kind of like go along with the kind of motion that you see in nature around you. And there's also custom wiggle. Where's custom wiggle? We like custom wiggle as well. Lets you do wiggling. And you can set up your own custom wiggles with that plugin. So yeah, that's good fun. Right, so has everyone got at least one animation? Has anyone got multiple animations going on? Hands up in the chat if you've got multiple animations. Cool. So yeah, the next step is timelines. So timelines are basically a really powerful sequencing tool. So if you've done stuff in like Blender or After Effects or that kind of thing before, you've probably experienced timelines. So like After Effects, there's like a little bar at the bottom and you can animate one thing and then you can line up another animation to play afterwards, and you can overlap another animation. Maybe you have a big delay and then have another one. And now this is something that you don't have in CSS. This is why CSS animation is so difficult, because in CSS, you've got no awareness of other animations. If you animate something with some keyframes, you can't say when those keyframes are done, play these keyframes. And then when those keyframes are done, play these keyframes. Like you can't do that. So you end up having to kind of force it with fake delays. And then if you change this bit here, these ones have no awareness of it. So everything kind of gets out of sync and it gets really messy really quickly. So let's have a little look at how we do timeline stuff. So right now we've got two tweens. We've got a GSAP tween for the UFO and one for a beam, and they're both just going to play on page load as it is at the moment. So you might have tried this if you've been trying to kind of line up an animation sequence. I bet some people have added in a delay already to kind of like push one of their animations back a little bit. And this is how you do it with CSS. You kind of do one animation and then you'd add a delay to the next keyframe block. But you don't have to do that with GSAP because we've got timelines. So all you have to do to make a timeline is you say const or let timeline equals GSAP.timeline, and that creates a container for you to put tweens into. And the container doesn't have a length itself, it's just a container that you can put tweens into. And then all we're going to do at the moment, you've probably got some tweens. So we've got GSAP from or GSAP to, or, GSAP from to. Rather than this, all we're going to change is just the beginning. So we're going to change the GSAP to the name of your timeline. So right here, we've got const timeline. So TL is the name of our timeline. And we're just going to change it from GSAP from to TL.from. And that immediately is putting both of those tweens onto a timeline, and they've got awareness of each other. So the first one's going to play. And then as soon as that one ends, the second one's going to play. So that's your, like, the most basic timeline that you can create. You could line up 10, 20, 30 tweens, and you could put TL dot whatever in front of all of them, and all of them would play one after another in a sequence. So that's like the simplest timeline that you could possibly create. But that's not really flexible enough. Like when we're creating sequenced animations, a lot of the time we want an animation to play and then we want a little bit of time and then another animation to play, or we might want them to play at the same time, or we might want to play 4 of them together and then wait a bit and then another one. So we've got the position parameter, and the position parameter controls how tweens, the relationship between tweens timing wise. So here we've got an absolute position parameter. So this is saying play at exactly 2 seconds. So we've got the first tween plays and then it'll wait a second. And then at exactly 2 seconds in, that one will play. I don't usually like using absolute times because absolute times are kind of like hard coding stuff into your animation. It's nice if it's a little bit more flexible, because if you change the duration of the first tween, you usually want the rest to kind of adjust the timing as well. Like you want the rest of the timeline to kind of fluidly adjust when you change something. So you can use relative positions. This is saying overlap by 1 second. So minus equals 1 is overlap by 1 second. You can say plus equals 1 second, and that's going to give you a gap of 1 second before the next animation plays. And then there's pointers as well. So you can use pointers, and pointers say at the start of the previous animation. You can say at the end of, which is the default anyway, so you probably didn't need to use that. And you can also add in labels as well. So this is really useful if you've got an animation where there's like an event happening. Like say you've got like a download button and you want, when something happens, you want the animation to kind of kick off. You can add a label at a specific point. And then you can hang different animations off that label. So this is adding a label at 1 second in, and then it's giving it a name, and then you can use that label to position animations on a timeline. So yeah, position parameter is incredibly flexible. It's also quite hard to wrap your brain around sometimes. So I made this little demo. Might do a little debug actually. Debug view. Yeah, I made this demo, which I'll put into the Google Doc and also the chat. There's the chat. It's the Google Doc. So this, if you want to have a little play around with how the position parameter works, this is a nice little demo to play around with. So this is offsetting by a certain number of seconds from the start of the timeline. You can say from the end in seconds, or you could do percents. So that's overlapping by 50% of the green animation. That's like 100%. So that lasts for 2 seconds, and we're adding a gap of the same duration. So yeah, you can use percents, you can use seconds, use all sorts of stuff. So yeah, that demo is there to kind of make things a little bit easier for people. But it's basically just very flexible in terms of timing, like whatever timing of animation you've got in your head, you can find a way to make it work with the position parameter. Yeah, I'll give you another like 15 minutes to put some tweens into your timelines. If anyone's struggling, just pop me the link and I'll do a little debug for you. I'll do a little demo here as well, actually. That's probably helpful. So you can see here, if I save it and refresh, all of the animations are happening at exactly the same time. So the rotation is happening at the same time as the first animation. And let's put a nice transform origin. So what we'll do is we'll say let timeline for GSAP timeline. And then if we replace all of these, it'll line them all up one after another. So it's going to animate in and then spin around, and then the lights are going to animate afterwards. You can also write it out like this. You can chain things. So rather than calling timeline each time, you can just call the next tween on the previous one. So a little bit, if you did jQuery back in the day, it's a little jQuery-esque, which I like because it's a little bit neater. One thing that a lot of people do and get confused with timelines is they'll try and add like an infinite tween to the middle of their timeline, and then they'll add something after it, and then they'll be like, why is my timeline not playing all the way through? So just make sure that you're not adding anything infinite into the middle of your timeline, because otherwise it will just hit that tween and it will just play forever and ever and ever. But yeah. And then timelines as well, you can pass in the same as you can pass in tweens. You pass in vars to tweens, you can pass stuff into timelines. So I can say repeat this timeline infinitely. And then it will play through. Let's actually just do this once. So it's easier to see. So it'll play through, spin around, do the little lights, and then it starts again from the beginning. You can also say like yo-yo, true, yo-yo-yo, yo-yo-yo, true. And then it will play through to the end and then go back to the beginning, animate back to the beginning. So it'll animate out like that. I'll show you an example of the position parameter as well. So the pointer, for instance, if we wanted the UFO to spin in as it's moving in, we could use a pointer like that. And now that's saying start that tween at the same time as the one before it. So it'll play the first two at exactly the same time. I'm sure you're all making stuff that looks a lot nicer than my demo. Just spinning everything around. We can try pull the little person up to the, where's the little person? Whee. Feel sorry for the little person. I don't know what's happening in the spaceship. It's going to get spat out again. Well, everyone's very quiet. Hopefully everyone is getting on fine and stuff isn't broken. But you mustn't be nervous if stuff is broken. Like, just reach out and let me know and I'll help.
If there's any time in the, as it were, like seminar for a slight tangent, I was wondering about when you talked about Canvas and how it's, you know, got its weaknesses and stuff. I did a thing recently where I was creating like a waveform in Canvas, like using maths, you know, just like a sine wave and then modulating it and stuff like that. How kind of doable is that using this, or is that not really the application for this kind of thing, like generative stuff? Like I say, it was literally a sine wave that I was then modulating, and I was using things like mouse input or position, you know, various ways to adjust that wave. Is that something that would be like, would this be overkill for that, or maybe the wrong tool for the task? Or
when you're saying this, are you talking about GSAP, the animation library, or are you talking about SVG?
I was thinking, well, I guess I'm thinking about both, but I was thinking like SVG sometimes seems like a lot for an application where like an image would do, you know, and sometimes it's not necessary. In the same way, I was just wondering if this would be overkill for doing like a simple sine wave or whatever.
So there's a demo that
That was quite cool.
Yeah. So like the only thing that I would say is like SVG isn't as performant as Canvas, so I probably wouldn't, like, if I was doing something sine wavy, I don't know if I'd reach for SVG because of the performance. So the distinction here, in case, because this is new to a lot of people, GSAP is the animation library. That's what's setting the properties, like changing the numbers of things. SVG is the rendering thing. So SVG is the stuff that's the graphic. SVG, the rendering layer, is less performant than Canvas, the rendering layer. But underneath both of those things are like shapes with numbers. and GSAP can animate those shapes with numbers. So using GSAP to create like a sine wavy, like generative stuff, like that would make your life easier than writing stuff yourself, mainly because GSAP has a sine wave ease function. So you wouldn't have had to do any of that stuff yourself. You could have just, yeah,
so
you could just go animate these points in a sine wave and it would just do the thing.
So if I'm reading you right, I could have used Canvas, but instead of doing math.py and math.random and all the kind of math.sine stuff that I did to do the maths, I would have used GSAP to, as it were, drive the Canvas shapes. So Canvas is like draw X and this is the Y relationship. And I was doing a bunch of stuff. GSAP might do the XY relationship for me. That's the part that it would, is that fair to say, or am I kind of missing the point?
Yeah, definitely. So
right, okay, cool,
like I don't know whether there is a simple demo that I can find.
Oh, well, if you want to send me a link or whatever, that's instead of spending too long. I realize I'm kind of distracting everybody from the main.
I think everyone's just poking around on their demos at the moment, to be honest.
Fair enough.
Yeah, there is like a specific demo that I was thinking of. Ah, this one. Yeah, there we go. Cool. So this is probably, I'll put it into here and also the chat.
That's definitely the kind of thing I'm looking for, I suppose. Yeah. So
this it's got like a custom ease and then it's animating the points here. So these are all the points that are animating. But you know, it's adding some points into an SVG canvas. So that's what I'm saying is it would be the same thing in Canvas with GSAP, but rather than using SVG, use Canvas to draw the points and then use GSAP to animate those points. And then, GSAP Getting Started guide has got this is a good demo of how you animate Canvas. Because GSAP, everything's objects in GSAP land. So any property of any object you can animate. All you have to do is with Canvas, you have to manually draw the canvas, which I'm sure you know after like making a demo. So whatever your draw function is, you would hook into that on update in GSAP. So you kind of have to manually say like GSAP animate this stuff, but while you're animating it, redraw the canvas for me.
Right, okay. So yeah, because I mean I was basically redrawing the canvas every frame or whatever you want to call it. So I guess you just have that as part of your function for the update and for the draw and stuff. Yeah.
So it's a lot easier than, I don't know what you were doing before, but like here you've literally got the draw function and then you just say on update draw. And you can do that with like the main GSAP ticker as well. So this is in a tween, but you've also got like the GSAP ticker, which is like the heart of the GSAP engine. It's like the kind of timing, like the request animation frame of GSAP, basically. So you could hook into that instead of into an individual tween. And then you could create as many timelines and stuff as you wanted. Oh, someone's asked how I went about making the SVGs in the first place. Yeah, I'm afraid because it's only 2 hours, there's not really enough time to go into like design and everything as well. There's so someone's mentioned there's a free tool called Inkscape. Inkscape is good. Feels a little bit like Microsoft Paint to me. I really like Affinity Designer. It is a paid thing, but it's only a once-off payment. I think it's like £40 or something. So it's not like Adobe where you're locked into the mafia pricing forever. It's just kind of, no subscription, once off. And it's a lot like Adobe Illustrator. It's like really nice to use and it feels really modern and it feels really fast. So yeah, that's what I would usually recommend. There's also, there's a fun little online tool called Boxy. if you just want a little play around with making stuff. Yeah, I'll pop that in there. The cool thing about Boxy is you get, I just launch it quickly. View, window. Where is it? I won't be able to find it now. Yeah, there's a little, oh, there we go, elements. Awesome. So yeah, you can create shapes in Boxy, and you can see as it's drawing, you can see the code updating at the bottom. So Boxy is really nice if you're just kind of learning about SVG, because you've got this like direct feedback thing, whereas a lot of other graphics editors, they kind of abstract it away a little bit, or a lot, so you never really see the code that you're drawing. But yeah, in Boxy, you can actually, you know, if you move points around, you can see those particular points updating in the code view at the bottom. So that's really nice. And then obviously you can just like copy the code out if you want as well. I hope that's helpful. How much longer have we got? Well, half an hour. Has anyone got any other questions?
I'm a little curious how long you reckon it'll take someone to learn this stuff. Did you said you started kind of in this GSAP thing a while ago, but like, is it a 6 month to get proficient thing, or is it like how long would you put on it?
It's a good question. So it depends what you want to do. So I would say you can learn the basics of GSAP in like a couple of days.
Cool.
It's just like it's a property manipulator. So like it depends what you want to be animating, really, at the end of the day. Like the core GSAP library, the main things to understand are tweens, and then timelines, and how to position tweens on timelines. That's the main thing. Like that's like 90% of it. And then once you understand that, the rest of the things kind of slot into place. But obviously there's going to be a huge difference between someone that wants to fade in some text on their website and someone that wants to build like a fully interactive like Three.js video game, for instance. Like there's going to be a huge world of difference. So yeah, depends what you want to use for it, use it for. There would be like all of the things that I've made, the hard bit hasn't been GSAP. The hard bit has been understanding about SVG, or understanding about Canvas, or understanding about Three.js. So like the animating the bits is like the nice easy bit, but it's kind of, yeah, the setup in whatever rendering layer you're using, like that's the big deep dive.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's not what I wanted to hear, obviously. I wanted to hear it was really easy and it'll be super fun. Still got to go and figure out SVGs properly. Oh well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fun thing though is, let's have a little look through. So there's some plugins. So yeah, you can do stuff like morphing with SVG. That's really fun. So you can kind of morph one shape into a different shape. There's also motion paths. So you can animate stuff along motion paths, where a demo is. Let's have a little look at some showcase stuff. Some fun things that people have made. Oh, I think this is an old Cassie thing. So the UFO is kind of animating in along a little motion path, and then sucking up a little sheepy and then flying off. So you can do fun stuff like that. Oh, this was motion path stuff that I made as well. So yeah, motion paths are really fun, like animating stuff along paths. So you can kind of learn like the basics, and then like as you go along, like layer stuff on. So SVG I think is a really nice place to start, because there's a set few things that SVG allows, and that's kind of stroke animation, animating along paths, morphing, and then just normal tweens and opacity fades and transforms and stuff. So you can pick up all of those things quite quickly, and then just think of fun ways to implement those tricks. It's kind of like a little bag of tricks, like a toolbox. And once you've got the tools, it's kind of just about thinking of creative implementations for them. This one's cute. Some little cards going along a motion path. So you see, it's all the same trick. It's all the same animation, but it's just kind of being used in different ways. Is there a GSAP course? Oh, there's a bunch of questions. How did I do the handwriting in my logo? So I haven't written anything on my blog in so long. But I think I wrote, creating my logo animation. I wrote a blog post on that. So that's a stroke animation with a mask on top of it. So yeah, SVG's got a whole bunch of tricks like masking and clipping and filters and like all sorts of things. So yeah, that's basically when I was talking about stroke dash array earlier. So it's an SVG thing, not a GSAP thing. SVG have strokes, and those strokes can have dashes. So this is just adding a dash to a stroke. Once you've got a dash on a stroke, you can use the offset to move the dashes along the stroke. So it kind of looks like there's like little bits of the stroke are moving. And if you make the stroke the same length as the path, it looks like it's invisible, right? And then when you move the strokes along, it looks like it's drawing in. So that's how you do stroke animations with SVG. It's just kind of strokes with dashes in between, and you kind of cleverly offset them and then move them along. And GSAP makes that quite easy for you, because we've got draw SVG, and draw SVG kind of draws out strokes for you. You don't have to calculate the length of them or anything. So this is my logo. This is what it looks like without the masking. This is horrible. It's just loads of chunky lines drawing out one after another. And then I added a mask on top, and masked the shapes so that we could get those like pointed edges. So that's with the mask. These are the clip paths I created for each of the lines. Took a really long time in SVG. It's not GSAP magic. It's not JavaScript magic. It's just a lot of SVG setup. And then, yeah, if you put that all together with the masks, draws out each part of it one by one. Yeah, and then I think I did a little, I did a little squash and stretch for the eye as well. So the little bouncy bit on the eye is like a custom bounce animation, and then that's the final bit. So yeah, that article kind of steps through all of it. Yeah, SVG is loads of fun. It's a good place to start with GSAP for sure. Yeah, and then a screen reader can read, probably not this one because this is just a demo in CodePen, but yeah, it was using a title attribute inside the SVG, so the screen reader will read it out as text. Matthew, is there a GSAP course? There are loads of GSAP courses, but because GSAP can be used for anything, to go back to like literally our homepage, like, yeah, you can use GSAP to animate anything. So it's a little tricky to have like a GSAP course. The best one for learning GSAP is Creative Coding Club. So it's not the shiniest looking course compared to a lot of the awards courses that get put up. But Carl used to work at GSAP and has been around since the Flash days. And he really knows all of his stuff, and he has loads and loads of like little lessons, if that's the kind of thing that you're into, like lots of little lessons and kind of stuff that you can work along with him. Yeah, I think 250 video lessons are there. But also like the GSAP docs are just full of information and full of demos. So personally, I would head over to like the Learning Center and go to like the getting started bit and the plugins and like read some of the stuff and read through the docs. The GSAP forums also are like full of information, so that's also a good place. And then there's just loads and loads of courses on YouTube and on awards and all over the place, but I can't vouch for the like veracity of any of those courses really. Yeah, it's a bit of a bit wild west out there with courses. A thing to look out for if you're doing GSAP courses is that the back in V2, like the old version, there was Tween Max and Tween Lite. So if you ever see Tween Max or Tween Lite in any content, that's like old GSAP. So that's like one thing to just look out for. If you look out for that, then you're probably fine with any course that you find. Would I recommend staying away from the plugins? No, not really. I think like just play around with whatever is fun for you. All of the plugins like follow the same kind of syntax. So if we look, for instance, at like a tween, you've got your target and then you've got your like vars object with your special properties in. So let's find a tween with lots of stuff in. Goodness. Let's go look at scroll trigger actually. So scroll trigger, for instance, scroll trigger is the same. So you've got a tween, and if you wanted to hook up that tween to scroll, it's just one line of code. Not that scary. That just hooks it up to scroll. And then if you want to get really advanced with it, like you can pass in a vars object with a whole load of stuff. The one thing that I would say is a lot of people, they see scroll triggered animations are very cool. And a lot of people see scroll trigger and they jump into scroll trigger without understanding what tweens or timelines are. And all scroll trigger is a way to control your tweens or timelines with scroll. So if you're not good at setting up a timeline and then you try and make something with scroll trigger, it's just going to be a bit of a disaster. So what I usually recommend to people who are trying to do scroll triggered animations is create your timeline first so that you're happy with your animation. So your animation is looking the way that you want it to look, and then add scroll trigger in. Rather than kind of trying to work backwards. But yeah, I don't think that there's like a linear or right way to learn. I think like one of the best ways of learning is just follow what you're excited about. That's kind of what I do, and then like realize that you're mega out of your depth and then work back again. But yeah, I don't think that there's like a set route, really. Sometimes like the best learnings are when you try and dive in the deep end and get really confused and then kind of figure things out and surprise yourself. Awesome. We've got enough time for a little show and tell if anyone wants to show what they've been working on. I wonder if anyone's been working on their own SVG stuff. Sometimes people do. Has anyone got something that they want to show off? Everyone's very quiet. No. So everyone that's come along to my workshops before, bearing in mind that the workshops are usually like several sessions or a whole day or like a couple of days. When people have made things, I've added them into these collections. So these are really cute ones. So if anyone makes anything super fun in the future, let me know and I'll add you into the collections. I think where's some of my favorites? This one was a cute one. Oh, this one is my all-time favorite, actually. So this little giraffe, the the guy's daughter made this in preschool out of paper and gave it to him as a present, and he recreated it in SVG and animated it, and it made my heart hurt with happiness. I was like, that's the cutest thing I've ever seen. So yeah, it's so cute. And then like at the heart of it, you know, it's just some GSAP tweens, which we've covered today. That's all that's happening. He hasn't even added a timeline in because all of them are just infinite GSAP tweens. So yeah, there's loads of really cute ones. Oh, we like the Pikachu as well. Little Pikachu doing bounces. Yeah, it's good fun. If you want to kind of play around with different SVGs as well, you can go to, there's places like FreePick, and a lot of other places online where you can get like download vectors. So yeah, some of them try and look for kind of simple things. Like if we look for dog, for instance, and then search for vectors, ones that will probably be like nice to animate are ones that are incredibly simple shapes. So this one, for instance, that looks really, really complicated. Like that doesn't look like that could be easily broken up into pieces. That looks like there's loads of information going on. But if you wanted to kind of play around, yeah, maybe something like this looks like it might be broken into smaller pieces. You never know how these artists have like set up their SVGs though, so it's a little bit of like who knows? But if you want to experiment and you want to download some graphics to play around with, like it's a good first place to go. If you work on a team with designers or you have a friend who's a designer, you could also kind of team up with someone to do an animation. Will I be running any more full workshops in the future? Not currently. I don't have any planned. I used to do a lot, but now because I work for GSAP, like I'm kind of like full-time helping people with animation. So I, in my spare time, like to do not that. I mostly like to just go for walks with my dog. But I might do. Also, if you've got any questions, I'm usually in the GSAP forums as well, so kind of pop over and I will help you. Yeah, if you want to start learning about SVG, I mean SVG, where are my docs? Like MDN is like, it's a scary place, but like it's got all of the stuff that you need to know, like clip paths, information about clip paths, different SVG shapes. Like it's got all of the stuff that you need to know. If you want like a little bit of an easier path, you can all have access to my workshop docs. So svg.fyi is my documentation site for my workshop. So yeah, in the intro to SVG bit, there's some stuff about the viewbox and viewport and about SVG elements and resources. And it's basically like all of the stuff that's in my SVG workshop, basically. You just don't have me jabbering over the top of it. But you're welcome to dig through that if it's helpful. Oh, we've got some code pens. Yeah, that's awesome, Nelly. That's great. She's got like the little person spinning around and it flying in and getting smaller as well. That's great. Oh, we got some twinkly stars. Oh, twinkly stars. That's great. Amazing. Cool. Yeah, I look forward to seeing what everyone makes. If you go away and create something of your own, like let me know. Tag me on Twitter if you're on the bad place still. If you're not, then good for you because it's horrible. But yeah, definitely like find me, reach out. Yeah, reach out if you get stuck as well. I think oh yeah, Kim's linked to me on Twitter. That's me. Me on Twitter there. You can also tag the GSAP account as well, and I'll share your work from the GSAP account. So yeah, I think that's the lot. That's all that I have. The end.
Thank you so much.
That's all good.
I love seeing all the examples at the end. I like that people are saying that SVGs are now less daunting, which I think is
Yay.
the best compliment.
That's great.
Yeah, less scared of SVG animations now. Perfect.
Awesome. That's what we like to hear. Yeah, I'm excited to see what you will make. Genuinely so much less scary is what we're aiming for. That's the one.
Yeah.